cool. Okay, great. So I have, we could, where would you like to start, Doug?
Well, we've just discussed a little bit about spaces, and I just got through driving in my car and I'm not feeling frazzled, as I mentioned maybe a few weeks ago. I'm feeling very refreshed right now. That there's a lot of potential in what has been developing here and on the site. And I feel like the direction that we're going towards is one that will reveal some sort of fruitfulness, more so than we have in the past. I feel like we'll be a little more coherent in what we're trying to do here on the site, or in our lives, or whatever it might be. So I'm just seeking that space. I mentioned to you previously that I want this to be an intimate conversation. And this chance to do a one-on-one session hasn't really occurred very often, except by chance, maybe a cafe where nobody else shows up. And it's just a one-on-one, and people start talking, and it turns into a great conversation. But we noted right before the recording started that we both kind of have a certain timeline to get things done, and we want to see results, I guess. But I feel that a lot can be accomplished in this conversation, especially through the difference of having 4 or 5 squares. This is a one-on-one. I only see your face on the screen right now. And this can happen more frequently, I feel. And I don't necessarily want this to be the prototypical example of how this is supposed to be done, but I really want to go somewhere with this, see what we can do here.
Yeah.
No.
That sounds good. I guess this is a little bit different, having a one-on-one. I like the public space. I like the public forum. But I don't like it when it gets too large or too small. But I think for our purposes, I think this is ideal, because we have been on many different conference calls together with slightly different purposes, although there's always an underlying similarity between them all. And I believe that in this forum that we've been focusing our attention, I guess we got 8 or 9 sessions. Maybe this is the 10th session on alternate realities and social dreaming. We have some experience now, so I would like to use this opportunity to reflect upon that experience with you, and what you may have learned, what I may have learned, what we could have learned, what we might learn, you know, how can we carry forward any learnings, and be open to what might happen next. Just a little history. I think that Michael has been with us until, I think, today. I think he said he had some holiday conflicts. And last time Marco was here, and we did a little a clean interview with him. I've been using clean as a technique, and you're familiar with it. And I have welcomed this particular forum as a space to really pay attention to the quality of our attention, and to look for patterns, to detect patterns, and patterns that connect, and to create kind of projects that I believe would be that would really be able, that I could use these techniques that I've honed over the years. These are high-level skills, actually. They're not easy to learn. And the fact that you and Michael have been so supportive and have been so curious is great, because this is something I cannot do in the cafe. I mean, I've tried to do it, and certainly there are people who are, and there have been some robust responses, but to go to another level, a deeper or higher, whatever your metaphor is, there needs to be, I believe, a kind of serious intent to make this happen. And I'm perfectly okay with people, this is not my intent, this is not what I'm interested in. And that's great. So there could be forums for mixed kind of intentions. Some people want to kick back and have a beer. Some people want to create world peace, you know, but they can all be in the same space and have an opportunity to reflect. But I think this is a rare opportunity where we could look at how we've been using this particular method. And oh, Ed has just responded to something on Cosmos. But and how you know, other kinds of practices that could be of use. I'm really open to that. And I know when we started this initiative, that you started and I joined you. We were together sort of finding some sort of form for these kind of unexpressed affective zones, you know, that we often register, but we don't quite get it into words. And I feel like we've had that opportunity. So I'm very grateful for that. And now I can start to reflect. I've had a certain amount of experience in this sort of noisy sort of environment that we're all in. But if we went to a cafe or a restaurant, that would be a noisy environment too. So I think it's the challenge for me is how to detect patterns, and patterns that connect you and me and nature and ecology and politics and art. How do we make all of that high-level abstraction? How do we make sense of it when, you know, there's so much noise? So I'm sort of really welcoming the ability to pay attention to the signal and the noise ratio. Like in this conversation, I've had a chance to do this. I've written down the desired outcome that you expressed in the forum a few hours ago, which you've elaborated on a little bit. And it's basically my desire for this conversation is to demonstrate that we can come into the virtual space and utilize it at its maximum. And so we have a technique where we could work with this that we've already done together. And we can do that. I also have drawn a picture. Shall I show it to you now?
I'm ready for it. Yeah.
And we'll just play it by ear. I think this is part of the history of transformations that we could sort of reflect on. And what I've been looking at, as I've been working with different maps, I think you've seen these before. I think when I stood up and did that, those movements in my chair and in my room, that little attempt to somatize the horizontal and the vertical. I don't have to review this. I think you've seen all this before. But I was attempting, this is the vertical. No, this is the horizontal. This is the vertical, the up and down. And this was the image of a sort of a figure, a humanoid figure, integrating vertical. And then I did that somatization where this is the vertical, this is the horizontal. And then I stood up in the chair and I did a combination of both the vertical and the horizontal while I was spinning around in the chair, which I'm not going to do now because I have a pillow in the chair and I very easily could lose my balance. But that was a demonstration of moving from a map to a territory. So I'm moving from a visual representation to something that's kinesthetic and proprioceptive and, requires some physicalization. And I think you mentioned, you made some reference to that, but I'm just like, this is sort of going back, could I have done this better? Maybe, but that's the best I could do with the limits that I have and the limits of this medium and the limits of the attention span of the persons who are viewing this. I think that's because we're not just shooting the breeze, you and me, this is a public forum. And I and this is, there's some things that we leave out when we're in a public forum. Even if we can delve, I think, into really private feelings that we usually keep private, and we can make them public. But there's a threshold. And I think that threshold about what I'm going to admit as evidence and what I'm going to leave as a reference or an inference and what I'm going to develop has a lot to do with the people that I'm with. And what they're interested in or not interested in is going to shape my communication a great deal. So it was a pleasure for me that I felt like I had the sort of leisure and I had enough attention and that I had enough background, that I had supplied enough background over a number of sessions to make this kind of thing happen. And, I don't know. I didn't get much feedback from other people. I don't know where it went. Could have just gone out there and disappeared very quickly. And that's fine with me. As long as I know that I did the best I could to optimize this opportunity, to bring forward my best, which isn't the best. It's just my best in that mood at that particular time and place. But I have this feeling that when we give a kind of attention to a quality of attention that we all get hugely rewarded. And I believe it takes a certain amount of skill to keep my stuff and your stuff in a kind of open space. So you have the leisure to put out your patterns, I can put out my patterns, and together we can shape something that's more inclusive. So that's the intention behind bringing forward this particular technique, clean language, in this particular form, and watching my own performance as I can watch these videos, and you can watch these videos, and we can parse them in different ways, and you may come up with something totally different than I would have in a kind of as an evaluator, taking a meta-observer position, which we can do with these videos, which is very hard to achieve if you're in the middle of a performance and you're acting out something with somebody else. And unless there's someone who's going to blow a whistle and say, let's stop here and reflect on this, we're probably not going to reflect on anything at all. It's just going to go on and on and on until, and maybe there'll be no patterns anyone bothers to detect. And then it's over, and then something else happens the next week, and no one's really digested anything. It's sort of like a smorgasbord of, oh, this tastes good, that tastes good, oh, I don't like that. But how nutritious is that? So I think we have had some stunning successes this last year where people have come together and really, I think, gone to another place that they don't go to very often in a public space. And that's what I would like more of. To do that safely so that people will come forward. Because if it's too high risk, they're not going to do anything except what they already know. So that's my spiel.
And you mentioned feedback. I'm not receiving much direct feedback at that time for standing upon the chair, for performing, which it's not necessarily a performance. It was separate from the face-to-face activity that we do. You were searching for, well, how do I express this flat drawing right here that I'm trying to represent as a three-dimensional thing? Let me use my body. And there you were. And we received it well. Everyone sat there and said, oh, that makes complete sense, without saying it.
That's good to know. I thought maybe they just thought I was out of my mind.
No, and my problem is, does it need to take that much time to finally get around to standing on chairs and making a fool of ourselves, so to speak, or being vulnerable to the point where we're able to express without the concern of even our close friendships that we've developed here. Like, oh, well, they might not come back for the next talk, or there might not be a response after this, or oops, I just screwed up everything for everybody. But it doesn't need to feel like that. I feel ideally there should be that understanding. One of the precursors to the alternative realities was a conversation between me, you, and Jeffrey, and you did clean language. And it was, I don't remember the title, but it was essentially getting into what are our holdups, or
stuck states.
Almost stuck states, yeah. And it would be nice if everybody could go through that process. But I felt like the three of us, after having that conversation, understand each other, what causes the issues between communication gaps or breakdowns, and how to assist each other, or at least on the lowest level to accept or understand the boundaries that we have. But to have that conversation with everybody, you can't require somebody to say, here, go to this module over here, tell us your stuck states, do this with John Bot, and let's get this done so we can have the conversation here on the cafe. So that's part of the issue, is we do know each other, but how well do we know each other?
Right.
But is there a level to where we can say we know each other enough to accept our experiments? I don't remember the quote that you just wrote down on your target there, but I kind of jokingly said, "Is that the best you can do, John, to stand up on a chair?" And like, what do we have?
That's right.
When I'm driving in the car, I have a chance to go far. I have a chance to explore my voice. I often, when I do your pops in my mind, I'll flip on the recorder on my phone and record. But these are not presentable to other people, or perhaps they might be. I've been experimenting with kind of, it's not necessarily a rap, it's not necessarily an opera, it's not necessarily, but it's me getting my voice out, learning to speak. A year ago, and years before that, I've had personal communication breakdowns to where my mind shuts me off or my voice is stilted. But I'm learning to develop that in different ways. In those moments by myself in the car when I'm singing, I wish to express to you, or I'll have maybe the group in mind, or maybe my mother, or certain people, this is what I want to say to you, type of thing, which might be expressed in a well-written letter after a month of thinking the thoughts deeply. But I want it to be in the moment, for us to be able to, no holds barred, removing any sort of conception of what the social norms are that we've developed throughout the years, and just let it out, whatever it might be. I wish for that space to be available at any given time in our conversations. I'm not feeling like singing right now. Earlier, I thought maybe I'd have a 5 to 10 minute song for you. Maybe I'll share one of my recordings or something, but it's not coming out at this time because, well, I'm actually talking with you. I don't have to let it out. So that, and there's poetry in the moment. I always mention I am not a writer because to actually put it on paper is to step away from that connection that we have to insert your favorite term, spiritual, God, the depth, the field, whatever it might be, but that connection is lost as soon as we try to transcribe it to a certain extent. There are great poets, great artists that have mastered the technique, but I'm working on storytelling in the moment, sharing those stories, retelling the stories as we've done here, a little bit better each time, perhaps, maybe not, but and then recentering to find exactly where we might want to go with all this.
Great. I'm jotting some notes down. I'm just going to do a little backtracking. You mentioned get my voice out and learning to speak. And this is what I want to express to you. No holds barred, and let it out. I wish for the space to be available, and poetry in the moment, and depth and field, and to transcribe it, and storytelling, and retelling, and recentering to find where we want to go with this. And can I ask you a few clean questions? Just want to, okay. And recentering to find out where exactly we want to go with this. Then what happens?
And the story is renewed. The voice finds its voice once again.
The voice finds its voice once again. And when the story is renewed and the voice finds its voice once again, is there anything else about that voice when the voice finds itself once again?
I hesitate to use ontological reference, but when I first came to the site, I was coming off of reading Paul Tillich, and that was maybe my core metaphor at the time, was the central being taking being and non-being back into its being. And I saw this as the core, perhaps within my body. And there would be tendrils or tentacles branching out, grasping at any given object or situation. And if it branched out too far, that tentacle or tendril could easily be cut off without killing the core being. So that's the non-being part, that was not part of the core being there. But the parts that can keep extending, and the tendrils that can reach out and grasp something, brings back that knowledge back into the core. So as the voice, there's that core voice that knows what it wants to say, and it's doing these branching outs, these tendril graspings.
And the Tillich quotation, the central being and non-being, back into its being, and the tendrils grasping, and too far out, they get cut off, and the tendrils can bring back that knowledge and core voice. And with all of that, what would you like to have happen now?
I'd like to hear your voice. We don't necessarily need to go into this clean language session with you, but I have been thinking that you haven't explained your new Catman all too much. You've kind of let us understand the history of how it was formed, but I don't see what this, other than maybe an effigy, or if you were to paint it, it would be hanging there in front of you right now, so you could observe and say, this is my Catman. What can my Catman do? But I feel like there can be a lot to be explored there. I don't know if you've done much exploring yourself directly, but I feel it's a rebirth. There has been a rebirth for you. You mentioned the trauma of the crucified cat and how it continues to haunt you, how something as grotesque as that can be a part of almost a requirement within the school system, to be witness to that, and to take that and morph it into this rebirth, well, it's essentially a Gnostic being that you created here that has many implications that, yeah. So that's my take on it, but I would like to make an attempt to understand it a little bit better. So.
And this is great feedback for this larger process. And I can, I think I already started to show you some of my map, and you've seen it before. So I'm reflecting upon this. And I'm also taking notes, and I'm reflecting upon what I believe is the desired outcome starting to emerge. And when I said, what would you like to have happen now, you started to refer to my map and our previous exploration. And so I sort of want to respect that request, and this is sort of exploratory. How do we, part of the challenge for doing this whole clean language enterprise is to differentiate my stuff from someone else's stuff. And then once you've differentiated, this is mine, this is his or hers, and the questions have been clean enough so that we can figure out what the boundary conditions are, then we could start to say, like you're doing, oh, this affected me in this way. And this person's internal process, they've externalized it in this picture or this movement. And this is my response. And you mentioned this is a rebirth for you and a Gnostic being. And that resonated with me as something that, oh yeah, I think Doug really has honored the level that I've been coming from. And I believe that we can now start to imagine what integration could be like. Now that we've differentiated, now we can integrate. But when we can't, we haven't adequately differentiated, what are we going to integrate? Has been my research question. And in the frequent food fights we often have, which is called, that's just what people do when they get together, is project onto one another and counter project, and they battle over inferences, and there's no evidence presented at all about anything. But now I feel like, okay, we have some evidence here that this can happen. The people can go to what's underneath or to what's above or to what's background and make it foreground and pay exquisite attention to what others are bringing forward and how do we integrate that. So I guess this is the next big challenge. But that I'm giving you feedback where what I felt like your comments were coming from a level that I would label identity. I feel like I think you're attending to my questions I'm exploring in my identity, in this morphing identity. And I believe you're coming from that level of your own self-awareness, so that you and I can then work at the identity level, and perhaps mission and vision can even begin. But I think until we get to this, where we are now in this conversation, it's very hard to articulate a vision, because there are too many competing voices that are basically just recircling the status quo that's already been pretty well established. And that bores most of us shitless, I think. We're bored out of our minds with that, the Joe Rogan show and all that kind of posturing about stuff that matters very little, I think, to anybody. Although there may be a core of something very dynamic that wants to be what wants to happen here, using that Joe Rogan show that I think Mark posted, which was just a fight with Graham Harmon about little bitty details in the paper I read about him. I thought it was totally, a lost opportunity. When you have a brilliant man like that, you could have asked some very intelligent questions that would have brought forward his intelligence, rather than create a situation where only paranoia runs amok among everybody. And these are the kind of high risk, adventures that I think we're engaged in right now. How do we find a frame in a culture where there seems to be a crisis about what the frame is? So I just want to say, I feel like we've done something different than what is the norm. But I hope this kind of exchange that we've just had is a new norm that could start to happen and flourish. And if enough of us are skilled enough in this technique or another technique, there may be other techniques out there that I'm not aware of, but I know this technique has worked really well for me. And I've enjoyed sharing it with others. So I believe it could be one of the techniques that we use. That could be, if enough of us could integrate it enough, we could take it into the forms that you go into, forms that I'm not engaged in, but you could carry across into that other form the learnings that you've had here, and you have the voice. So you could integrate all of that, and others would be picking up on it through your voice, because our voices are so connected to the rest of our bodies and our faces. And we can start to channel, I think, at those identity levels. We could then, I believe, create, all kinds of creative opportunities for each other. So,
can I go? I don't know if this is off script, but I wanted to show you some drawings here in just a second. But and I've not forgotten the context, but it was originally started right before you did your presentation on Gnostic being. So I have a few drawings. I think I shared one during that conversation. But before I do that, what you're saying about the voice and having what we want to share and what is important to us and the limits of our conversations, or more specifically, I'm thinking about the forum. I personally took a deep dive into the Davor Loeffler. So the conversation that was being had on the forum, Marco mentioned wanting to know more about the what role money plays. Yeah. And knowing him, it's not about, I want more money, that type of thing. He really wants to hone in on the core essence of how can we change economy. And his paper I don't know if you read the entire paper that he posted. Yeah.
Yeah, I've studied him. He's a good.
Yeah. I listened to a 3-hour conversation on the new Center for something research, but he presents his thing there.
Oh, did you watch it?
That was really good conversation that clarified his paper. That it's all over the place because it seems to be a summary of his dissertation, which I haven't read.
Which is unfortunately, it seems in German, so we can't read it unless you know German. But
that's why we need to enlist Ed. But I recognized where you got the crow cracking the nut from the. I've been trying to figure out where that comes into play, and I had another epiphany, a sort of revelation of this paper, along with economics and just all sorts of things were coming together that I wished to post, but I couldn't. So I'm thinking, in the moment, we just simply click on a Zoom link, and if it automatically records, then you or I or whoever could just simply say, I've got this idea, this is really what I want to say, but I can't say it on the forum because it takes me 30 hours to try to piece it together, and it's this idea, this, and to be able to post that would be great.
Yeah.
We don't have that set up right now, so but it's possible. So that's the singular kind of personal voice that needs to be heard, that can't be heard, that we go a week without hearing a response simply because I suck at typing, something like that.
Yeah.
Then we have what we're doing now, sharing ideas. These are accumulated ideas. We've known each other for about a year now, and this is a chance to really get to know each other, perhaps. And I think we're doing a great job of it right now. Then there's the cafe or the reading groups and the writing groups, and we've mentioned other groups that could form, like the Cosmos pods or the RO pods, something like that, more intimate settings with certain boundaries or restrictions or pauses, things like that. But I wanted to share these drawings because it's an alternate form for me.
Please.
It was noted in my mind that I've not been drawing much. I've never been an artist or a painter or anything like that, but I hadn't been carrying around a doodle notebook. So the day before the Gnostic being conversation, I drew a tree, and in the background it says something kind of, oh no, there it is. It's not really, it's a discombobulated form of the word something. There's something coming in. I think this was before the energy at our best
Uh-huh.
So this was before the wind metaphor, and I just now made the connection that, oh, this looks a lot like that drawing that I made there.
Yeah.
And then later that night, I took notes on what you were talking about. So we have, those are my renditions of your drawing there of the crow, the Gnostic being, divine spark. You mentioned emanate, embed, and merge, and act. So I drew that. And then while everybody was talking,
That was the Gidley conversation. Right. Oh, yes. Now I remember this. Okay.
So I drew this, and it was essentially circles and lines, but it was recognized as the crow. The crow. If you look closely, it does look like it could be a crow.
Yeah.
So that was one of my most beautiful drawings of recent. And then I recently read a book by Haruki Murakami called Killing Commendatore, which is I don't know if you've read anything by him, but
No.
He has a very mundane style of writing that takes deep dives into the weird, into the paranormal, and just makes it seem normal with his main character, who is usually just a average, pathetic white male, or male, Japanese male, and gets involved with a little bit of hookers on the side or something, but there's always this connection with the internal dark realm. But I have one quote here and it's an unfinished drawing. I just didn't know where to go with this one. But the quote is, "He opened his eyes wide and scooped those chords out from the darkness of his consciousness." I think he's having a conversation with a 2-foot tall idea from a painting. It didn't just jump out of the painting, but it came to him in the middle of the night. So similar to a dream-like situation, but it manifests as a real entity, and it goes along with him. So he opened his eyes wide and scooped those chords from out of the darkness of his consciousness. What is important is not creating something out of nothing. What my friends need to do is discover the right things from what is already there. So that's essentially what I feel like we're attempting in various degrees to do here in past conversations with maybe constantly within ourselves. The something is already there. The world is around us. And we need to discover the right thing. We don't need to go and be a hermit to get away from society. We need to discover what the right thing is from what is already there. And then another unfinished, this is a poem I don't even remember writing. I think that was the weekend I was reading Wallace Stevens and had a lot of ideas looming around in my brain, but it's called The Nutcracker. And I don't know where these words came from. And I haven't read them, but I'll read them now, and I think they're fitting to what we're doing here. What are we to do with our immediate environment? Do you see what is right in front of you? Do you see what to do with what is right in front of you? We are in the position of unveiling, cracking open. We are seeing the patterns as they unfold, previously untold. We ride waves, monads, and kind of ends there. But, so, yeah, thanks for letting me share that. But there's quite a few connections I'm feeling, and we've noted. At least I'm going off the last alternate reality conversation that you and Marco and Michael had, and the ending was what made me think. Marco mentioned he's in review mode, or recalibration mode. Michael mentioned the holidays and kind of needing to let what we've been doing settle in. It has been quite a bit of information to take, and especially if you're a newcomer trying to catch up from the year or two of what's been going on the site, that can be quite an overload, I would imagine. And so I felt this was the opportunity for the two of us, as we're doing now, to reflect. And I hope to do that, not just at the end of each year, but specifically right now, reflect on what we've accomplished here and where we're going with it. Yeah, thanks for listening.
Well, my pleasure. And where we're going with it. And integration. And I'm just going to, I just wanted to backtrack a little bit and then pause and then reflect. And I might ask a few clean questions as I go along. So this is very improvisational. It's cleanish, clean enough, okay? And then conversation, because I think there needs to be a healthy balance between differentiation and integration. And I do think there is a place for shooting the breeze. But when you shoot that breeze, you know, you want to know where that breeze has been and where it's going, you know. And I'm very, very aware of the different currents that are flowing within me and around me, and how incredibly chaotic it quickly becomes if there's no center. And that's my main challenge. And right now, I'm sort of drawn in several different directions, but I'm going to choose one of those directions. But before I do that, let me do this first. Something coming in. You showed us one drawing. I think you talked about, and you saw the trees. And in a later drawing, the trees, there was a wind that circulated among the trees. I think it was a red color, I think. The wind was in red, I believe. You mentioned an author that you liked, a Japanese author who does deep dives into the weird, the internal dark realm. Oh, yes. Yes. And that was done after that initial drawing you showed us.
I have the date 11/7. So yeah, that was, I have no idea now. That was definitely after, yeah.
So we see, that looks like a motif to me. The trees in one drawing, and this almost a similar kind of tree in the next drawing, but there's now a red colored wind that's circulating among the trees. So to me, that's a kind of shift that's occurred through time. We don't have the exact dates, but we know one is before the other. Those are kind of things I pay attention to, because that's sometimes a direction might be emerging. Something that had been background, even noise, is becoming foreground and isn't as noisy. It could actually become a signal, and then patterns can start to emerge. Also, you mentioned earlier about, you did quote this gentleman, the Japanese gentleman. He opened his eyes wide, a 2 feet tall idea. And he talks about the right things, learning about the right things from what is already there. And is there a relationship between that and the central being and non-being coming back into its being? I believe you said that was Tillich. And poetry in the moment, and the depth in the field, and transcribing it, and storytelling and retelling. And the Gnostic being. I sort of want to ask, I don't know if this is a good question or not, we're just playing around. Is there anything else about, and you mentioned rebirth. You thought that moving from the crucified cat.
Mm-hmm.
Moving from that crucified cat to this dynamic cat man, I noticed that the sex of the cat is ambiguous. It doesn't have to be a cat man, it could just be cat human, right? I noticed that as I looked at that looks like a little odd to me, that the sex of the cat is sort of not clarified in my drawing, but I don't feel like it needs to be, because it's really a cat human.
Mm-hmm.
But what happens next is sort of like this. This is sort of I don't know if it has anything to do with the Gnostic being or not, but I don't know if you can see this. There's a humanoid figure.
I see question marks.
Yeah, see the figure? The head and the torso and the energy centers and the feet are sort of going into a ground, and their bodies, physical bodies below. And there's lots of noise all around this figure. You can see the sort of ambiguous sort of scribblings above and below. And I think up above there's a
beyond.
There's a beyond. And then there's a sort of figure in the middle. And then there's a below. That's the physical. And there's a kind of up-down dynamic where I think the body, whatever the body is my main concern, detecting a pattern. And also in a noisy space with lots of ambiguity, how do we detect pattern? This is sort of the drawing I think that comes out of the previous drawings. And the subtle and the virtual seems to be another theme that I think is definitely related to the Gnostic being.
And the virtual, yeah, the connection between the virtual and the subtle there. That's not one I've thought about, but it is a subtle realm in a certain sense.
Could you do me a favor? And this is putting you on the spot, I know, but could you turn that into a clean question, what you just offered there?
So when
Here,
the cat,
shall I
so
show you?
you have the up and the down, you have the physical body, you have the beyond, and you have the man with his recognition of the subtle bodies.
Mhm.
And the questioning or the concern about the patterns that connect. Is there a relationship between the subtle and the virtual?
Oh, that's very good. I'm not sure, but if I could articulate that, that would be my next writing project.
So, can we attempt to write now? Write right now through metaphor. If you would like to expand on this now, I wouldn't mind making an attempt to help you reach that.
Okay.
And maybe we'll spark some creativity later on when you actually get a chance to write.
This could actually be a sort of a desired outcome, maybe. Maybe my desired outcome has to do with a new writing project. And working with, I know we did this is more history, sort of, and I'm also aware that I'm meta-commenting. Because I think that was a part of our last discussion was about when a person goes into a meta-comment mode, and what happens right before meta. Some people use meta as a defense to avoid what happens. I speak from my own experience there, but I also know how if we can stay in the perceptual space and locate these entities,
Right.
how do we, and these very subtle micro perceptual kind of right at the tip of my tongue, there's somewhere in my space, it's sort of, does it have a size or shape? Well, if I can locate it and give it a size or shape, then I can create relationships with it.
So John, when there is the background and the foreground, when there is the subtle and the virtual, when virtual, what happens to subtle?
That's a good question, but can you ask me a little bit more about virtual? Size, shape, anything else about virtual? Does it have a size or shape? Whereabouts is virtual? That would help me to create a relationship to the subtle, which at this point I don't have.
So, and
that's feedback.
Right. Makes sense.
Could you help me to ask me some developing questions about the virtual or the subtle, either one, and then we can ask relationship questions.
So we'll start with the subtle.
That's a very good way to go. That's a very good direction. One that I was trying to go in my interview with Marco, which got bogged down actually because we didn't have enough time.
So you have the subtle, you're drawing.
The foreground and background, you located that in my perceptual space. That was great.
So is there anything else about the subtle?
Oh, okay. Yeah, the subtle is, okay. Well, I guess the subtle doesn't make sense without the physical. And the physical doesn't make much sense without the subtle. And the virtual is a special case, which is neither subtle nor physical, but that draws upon both. Boy, is that confusing.
So, subtle and physical. And when physical at your best, what happens to subtle?
That's a very good question. And physical at my best. Well, physical at my best is actually when I draw upon the subtle, like when I'm dancing, and I'm not a great dancer, but I've had a lot of friends who are great dancers, and I've learned how to use my body how they use their body. The nonverbals that they're so exquisitely sensitive to. And I also had a boyfriend who was deaf mute. He was, and I didn't know sign. So we communicated he was able to write and I was able to write. We responded there. But 99% of our communication, his body was so beautiful because he could make the most abstract ideas concrete in 2 or 3 gestures. We would walk into a public space and he would point to a man or a woman and he would mimic them. He would make one gesture, which was like looking at Japanese calligraphy. You know how just a quick gesture that the artist makes brings forward a whole world? He would do that. He would just look at that person and he would make a gesture that totally captured the whole dynamic tempo rhythm of that person. That amazed me, you know, and that, of course, people like him are considered disabled, which is hyper ironic, you know, because we who talk all the time seems to me who is so are not nearly as in touch with their bodies as this person displayed. And I learned so much from him about how impoverished we who talk all the time are. And we notice this when we're around children, how beautiful they are without getting bogged down in words, and how expressive and clear they can be. Not that they can't get into chaotic situations. We have to monitor them carefully to prevent them from hurting themselves or hurting somebody else. So I think we have these ancient prohibitions against knowing all this stuff. But I think that the healthy physical is tuning into the subtle, which is very nonverbal. In my experience of when the body goes to sleep at night and the subtle takes over, there's not a whole lot of talking going on, but there's infinitely more powerful communications happening. And I don't know what to do with all that, because the waking state in the physical social settings that I'm in actually prevent any integration of the subtle and the physical from happening. So it's a private kind of, you have to have a real passion for that, as I believe you do, because you study and practice different kinds of yoga, different kinds of mind-body connection kind of stuff. And reading and literature, I think, is very important for developing these subtle capacities, these very high-level sensitivities to the subtle. Jump in whenever you want to, or I'll talk all day.
So the physical is at its best when drawing upon the subtle. Mm-hmm. And communication, abstract, becomes concrete, brings forward a whole world. And limits of the social and the private. What is there anything else about limits?
Well, I guess that's kind of arbitrary. Probably not totally. I mean, culture really is about making people obey invisible rules. We learn very early what's appropriate and what's not, what can be shared and what can't be shared. And our language sort of reinforces that. But if we've had unusual experiences, as most of us have, we have to find a way of, somatizing. I think our intelligence, our somatic intelligence, can work with that ambiguity. And through movement, through voice, through art, and we can channel these vast, subtle, I think they're generated by the subtle and from the subtle, coming through the physical in ways that are safe for the organism and for the culture. There's a risk involved, for sure, but I think there's a risk involved if we don't allow it, because then I believe we're confusing, I think, our collaborative capacity, and I think what Loeffler says about cultural capacity. Our cultural capacities are incredibly diminished without this, I don't want to say the word commerce because it sounds too financial, but there is a kind of commerce that's going on, a kind of feedback, feed forward, fast forward, that, has to be, if we need to pay attention to this kind of commerce. And oddly enough, I think it could become part of our post-money society, because there's great satisfaction in the aesthetic pleasures that are unleashed by poetry and art and music and storytelling and jokes and paradoxes and ironies that, are unleashed. But I think it's going to be hard for us to pull that off in a virtual zone where algorithms that are designed to profit a few and deprive the many is dominant. Notice I'm not against algorithms. I'm just against algorithms that are used in ways that are unecological. So I guess it's that my passion for coming up with all these models of really good investigators becomes a kind of art form in a way. Because if we can contrast and compare a Davor Loeffler with in Catherine Hales, and how they're taking out of all the models that they've explored, they're streamlining it to create their own model. And we can do the same with their model. If we are tuning to, but we're paying attention to different things. Loeffler's paying to something different from Hales. I'm paying it to something that's different from Hales or from Loeffler. But I think Loeffler and Hales would appreciate where I'm coming from. So I think there's a family resemblance.
So John?
Yes.
I want to continue with the exploration into the virtual. But first, I want to check and see if there's anything else that needs to be said about subtle.
Well, a whole lot more could be settled, could be discussed. Did you get? But it may not be. But I do believe we're in the beginning of having a. We could start talking about relationships, because, and also intentions. And I believe that's whereabouts is the subtle. When a subtle body, where is that subtle body? When a physical body, where's that physical body? Or how will you know a physical body? Or how will you know a subtle body? And when a virtual body, which is beyond but also includes both physical and subtle, whereabouts is it? So I think there are a lot of qualities that could still be developed more. But if you want to go for relationships, you might want to do that, but I'm just letting you know.
So here's what I'm imagining. You've gone from your core and you've taken your physical and subtle, and it wants to be bridged with the virtual. Now, what would you like to have happen? Would you like, this is outside of clean language right now, this is the actual question. Do you want to start from the virtual sphere and approach that relationship? Or do you want to go from that relationship where we are right now and then maybe go back into the virtual?
Well, that's a very good question. Yes, it's a very good question. You're also somatizing it. You're showing me in your body space, in your perceptual space, what you think my perceptual space is. But that's not my perceptual space. That's your perceptual space.
Gotcha. So maybe a conversation would be best right now.
No. I think that's great, because you let me know you've somatized it. And you showed me in your perceptual space where the astral, where the physical and the, I think you said I'm a little confused, but you were using this fist, and then you wanted to know how they interact. And that's your model. As a modeler, you need to know that. That's great.
Right.
But I don't necessarily need to know that. I could, or I could not, but I think that it would be helpful for you as a modeler to hold that. And that's where that gives you a direction. But then can you translate? That's the background foreground shift, perhaps, as we find something that we can differentiate you from me, then we can later integrate whatever we come up with.
Right.
But I'm always saying, let's differentiate first, then we can integrate. But let's don't try to integrate too fast. I'm 60, almost 65 years old. I've been working with this for 55 years. We don't have to do this in the next 10 minutes. I can wait a little bit longer.
And
so these are ancient issues that our species has been grappling with and are now continuing to grapple with. And we don't know how to frame this yet. So I'm just saying, let's do chunk down and chunk really slow. That's my request.
Right. So I'm going to chunk down to the point of allowing you to receive my thoughts while you were speaking, while at the same time I was taking notes and maybe going to progress with the clean language. But I kind of had a flashback when you started talking about Loeffler and what I had desired to put out in words on the site when I couldn't, which I can't do with my voice right now because it would be an inarticulate mess. As you're saying, we don't have the framework. And I really do want to make that connection. I want that to happen immediately. And part of what his conclusion in that paper is that it's distributing potential, right? That's the name of the paper. And if I can articulate the last part, hopefully somewhat correctly, he's essentially saying, yes, there are algorithms. Yes, this is how our culture has evolved. That's where we are at right now. And you say post-money, you say post-economic, and he's essentially, and what he's getting at is that there is a way to go about that, or a way to recognize those patterns. And yes, it has been the big men on top who are monetizing, who are eating away at the algorithm, supposedly monopolizing it. But he notes that it breaks down to the individual level, that it can never be how they want it to be. But he doesn't say it in these words, but it's basically being interpreted that the local activity will always cause the potentials, the future possibilities to never be monetized, to never be complete, in the sense that there can be the complete Internet of Things or something like that. And I feel we're going in that direction in this conversation. I feel the site and the goals we have on the co-op type of goals are in that direction. So with that said, what would you like to have happen?
Well, that's great, because that you paying attention to Loeffler, because he mentions, I believe it's in that paper, or maybe it's in something else in that video that you mentioned that you saw. But there are cultural capacities that he believes are, he traces the history of the unfolding of these cultural capacities. And he talks about I can't remember the language, the bipodal awareness. So when two people get together and share an intention, they can be building a fire together. You have a spear and I have a spear. We have to go out and hunt together to get some game so that our family can eat tonight. Those are instances where humans created these conditions where they shared attention and had tasks and relationships. So we're in the same, and because of that, we're here today having this virtual conversation. And so he's talking about these cultural capacities can get more and more complex, but they all build on the same thing. And children have to, babies are quickly brought into this kind of bipodal space, or they don't survive. And this is the relationships that they have, depending on and those persons who are taking care of them, what's important to those persons about transmitting culture so that this new life can have a viability. This is a really primary directive that every generation has towards the generation that's coming. And I believe that we're doing a really bad job right now. And I believe we're really being manipulated by all these algorithms, by persons with short-term memories who are only wanting to maximize their profits in the next 3 months. They don't give a shit about all the excellent science that's coming in. And I believe that Loeffler is very alarmed by this. And he's very much about these cultural capacities will involve new subjectivities and new metaphysics. So I believe in our conversation today, we've been putting some flesh onto this. We're fleshing this out. What are the new subjectivities? What are the new metaphysics that are going to emerge so that that our cultures can be vibrant enough so that they can be and inclusive enough so that something can be transmitted through our education, through our institutions. As we've all been, exploring this through Gidley and through Wilbur, through Gebser, through Aurobindo, through Sloterdijk. I mean, these thinkers are all working on this, whether they're, alive or recently deceased, as Aurobindo died 60 years ago. I think we have to do better than we've done. We probably have to do better than any generation has ever done. And that's why I don't want to sit back at the cafe and shoot the breeze. I got too much work to do. And I want to find collaborations that cross-fertilize so that we can carry across from conversation to conversation or from forum to forum something that we've learned so that we're not starting all over again every conversation. My frustration is so many conversations, brilliant dynamic reference points could be made. But if they're not made, they disappear into this virtual space very fast. This is something that we are challenged by because we don't have a town square or that coffee shop or that pub or that conference room where we can all gather together and form some sort of coherent action plan. Each of us can take what we learn from here and apply it locally the best way we can. But I think that we're not doing enough. I think to make those kinds of creative opportunities.
You're saying that from even within our own creative environment, right?
Well, there are multiple environments that we're all participating in. And I think creativity and writing and thinking and are front and center in everyone's attention because we're all big readers. And we love the arts and we're into this visionary kind of literature that we're all playing around with. But I think that the different models that we have, let's use all of our knowledge, use all of it well. And let's find ways of bringing forward these new subjectivities and the new metaphysics that are going to be required for these cultural capacities to develop so that we can survive This isn't just because it's going to be fun, more fun. We won't survive to have any fun at all if there aren't enough of us paying attention. It doesn't mean that everybody has to pay attention to it. I doubt that that will ever happen, but there will have to be enough people who are interested in these new subjectivities and these new possible metaphysics, and to create a safe enough container so that these experiments can start happening. And that'll come, and I'm sure new products and new economy will emerge if there are enough of us who want this to happen. But right now, I think our frames are being disrupted by very narrowly focused algorithmic maniacs. And they are ascendant right now, but that's not necessarily the way it's going to be. Unless we just say, okay, this is just, let Google take care of all this. We don't have to worry about it. And let's just go shopping. Anyway, these are my concerns. And I really appreciate, in the time we have left, we've been going, I guess, an hour and a half, a little over an hour and a half. You know, how I believe that in our discourse event today, and I can look at the recording afterwards and look at all the things that I wasn't paying attention to. It's just really, I think, really a pleasure that I feel like you've been really doing your best to pay attention. And I'm doing my best to pay attention. And together, pay attention may not be the right word. Maybe it's to give attention rather than to pay attention. Because I think we monetized our attention. And I think that's very unfortunate, that attention isn't something that we just freely give. So I sort of want to reprogram my own communications here to start giving attention freely, so that our projects can start to flourish. And that means, you know, what's the frame? You know, I think that you can unframe, you can deframe, you can reframe if you have a frame. But if you just want to reframe and deframe, you're just going to be in deconstructive mode and never reconstruct anything that will move forward in order to defeat these motherfuckers who want it all. And they're going to get what they want if we don't learn how to be smarter than their algorithms. That's a big leap. I'm
So
open to
there's so much potential, and I'm obviously taking it slow here, but sorry. Let's go back to, you said that the relationship between the subtle and the virtual would be something to write about.
Right.
So a question that we need to know, that we don't have the answers to, that we're searching for is, and I don't think I mean it in the same sense that Kevin Kelly meant when he said what technology wants, but it might be similar. But so we can even clean language that and say, and what would the virtual like to have happen?
That's right. That's a good one.
And we've been doing that this entire conversation. We've noted what we would like for the virtual to have for our particular spaces here. But given all that we have, all that we've talked about, these entities we're forming with the trees, the wind, the Catman turning back into a human form now, it looks like in your drawings. And that's essentially where you've left off, where you're exploring. You're bringing all of that into, I hesitate to use the word agency, into the agency of this environment we're creating. The word agencement comes to mind again, and we're seeking that agencement. So I always have more to say, and I do not need to be anywhere in particular anytime soon. So if we feel like this conversation needs to carry on, we can do that.
Could we go another 20 minutes? Would that be
Yes.
okay with you? Okay, because I think the time frame is important that we honor that, because I'm reluctant to go into something that sometimes requires more attention than our time frame allows. That's why I would not propose doing anything like this at the cafe, because that's not the setup. And but we can, at the cafe, bring with us something that we may have learned in this particular interview, in this particular conversation. And that, so I'm very interested in what carries across. And that doesn't necessarily have to be anything you have to articulate. It's just something that's already there. And because I realize there's some people who don't want to go deep or this deep. They want to stay at a certain level, and they want to leave the conversation feeling pretty much the same as when they started the conversation. But I'm not that way. You know, I'm really very interested in something being added on that wasn't there. Something that that's added on that comes out of the mutual intentions that are expressed by everyone. So I'm very interested in how do you blend that, a first person, healthy first person that's robust, with what the group needs, which may be a very diverse group. It's coming from many different directions. So how do we pull that off? Yeah. I think we've been doing a good job most of the time. But I think we have to sort of personalize some of this so that, you know, you, me, and others, and a few others who might be more interested in internal process can have an opportunity to figure that out. Because internal process is very tricky. You know, it's not something that's, I think you can do without some kind of technique. And that, I think, is what all the meditation practices are. They're just different techniques that have been used in different times and places to create certain kinds of effects in the sensorium. All these subtle realms, different researchers have different techniques in order to create those cultural capacities. And then they write big texts about it, and then you get the disciples to come in and do the techniques and forget entirely what the whole reason for doing these techniques was, because centuries later, no one knows the difference between samadhi and satori and all these different Sanskrit terms, but they're still using them. And that's where my frustration is I feel like the traditions are not serving us particularly well in the circumstances that we're in right now. And I think there may be a hindrance, but I still do the yogas, the dream yoga, and I think there are innovative practitioners out there, and we know some of them. I think we've shared some, and I think that's very interesting. So, but
I'm interested in the educational side of it. This is an education that we're receiving here. I posted that we'll be discussing Jeffrey's paper next week entitled Subversive Pedagogy, which is, he terms it the intruder. And we talked about during the minor gesture, when, especially the conversation that Erin Manning was present, that she essentially is an intruder to the environment there. She's a professor that is not seen as she doesn't see herself as a professor that goes against the rules as much as possible. She's stated she has tenure, so she's able to do whatever the hell she wants. I think she even phrased it, I can do whatever the fuck I want, in that conversation, because that's how passionate she is about doing whatever the fuck she wants. And that's a good feeling to have, to know that there are people out there doing that. And we are attempting to do the same thing here. at any given time. We require a frame, we require reframing, and we require, in the moment especially, in that moment when we are able to connect, there is no frame, there's no teacher, there's nothing but that everything that's going on. There's so much to be accomplished in that moment. Just as we know there's so much to be accomplished in this lifetime, in this direction we're heading, in this generation that seems to be accelerating in quite so many ways. And you're not sitting there in retirement in a nice little hut by your fire trying to, I don't know, light a candle and read a book or something like that. You're, even at your age, you're searching still. And that's something that is of great importance to me. And I'm drawn to the phrase that I learned in undergraduate education that some psychologists said, we stop developing at age 30, our personality stops. And I took that to mean that that's retirement age for becoming who we, that's when we'll be who we are, and we'll carry on the rest of our life. But there's a time to pause and stop and be within a certain mode, but then there's always a time for evaluating and reevaluating.
Yes, and revising.
Revising, yeah.
Yeah, as we and to break frame. We can break the frame if we have a frame. But I think this flying by the seat of your pants forever routine bores me, because it's not anarchy. Anarchy takes a lot of work.
It's what they call lethargy.
Yeah. It's like being a pig in shit. That's what it's like. And I think a lot of people just want to go oink, oink, oink. They go for it then, but I'm not interested. I'm interested in, I think we've romanticized chaos quite a bit, and chaos is nowhere anyone really wants to be, because I've been in chaotic situations. And there's nothing you can do except embrace the death that is coming at you. And people who talk about chaos as something romantic that they're attracted to don't know anything about it. So I'm where I think, I don't think we're there yet, but we certainly could be.
That's what we're up against, is that chaos. It's not, doesn't necessarily, we don't have to become that chaos. And our methods might seem chaotic, but
that's right.
There's a method to the madness, they say.
I think that those who are doing the algorithms want you to be in chaos, because then they can be the bosses. They will keep you in perpetual state of chaos if they can. But I think this is a large conversation that we could have. And maybe in the next few minutes, we could, like, what we've learned today, what I would like to have happen. And to me, this has been great, because we have all kinds of, we've shared our drawings. We have, I think, some potentially desired outcomes that are happening. We've used some clean language. I think we've been looking at different levels, and we've referred to different models. And I'm looking for good data and collecting good data. And Sense Lab is the name of, I think, Erin Manning's organization, which I love. I love Sense Lab, and I love the idea of a lab. I think this alternate dreaming could become like a lab, a social dreaming lab, where we, quite frankly, are experimenting, and with different kinds of frames and different kinds of, arranging different kinds of experiments and the different kinds of discourses that can emerge out of that. And the new subjectivities and the new metaphysics that are going to be necessary for these cultural capacities that Loeffler talks about. So I hope maybe you and I, this is what I learned today and what I hope could happen next is that you and I could do something on Davor Loeffler and contrast and compare Loeffler's ecological futures with Gidley's or with Hale's. And I only did
Gebser, there are a lot of similarities there to him, which
absolutely.
I haven't explored fully yet. But yeah.
And I'm actually very surprised that Loeffler doesn't reference Gebser, because he has a part of, I think there's a lot of resonance. But I think Loeffler is looking at the exteriors. He's looking at the systems.
And it sounded like his school of thought was just a couple degrees away from where the integralist Gebserian type of learning might be. But I almost feel like reaching out to him and asking, have you heard of this dude? You might benefit from it.
I think he's working with exteriors.
Mm-hmm.
He's looking at the technology and the history of technology and the history of abstraction. And he's looking at where that could be going. But he's not looking at the interiors in like what we're doing today. We're going into the interiors of the potential for a new kind of intersubjectivity, using the virtual, but not being dominated by the virtual. We can still refer to and have access to the physical and the subtle, rather than all of that being erased and we become sucked into this flat screen, diminished reality, which I think the algorithm spin meisters would be happy for us to do. So I believe we're using the technology in a sort of subversive way, so that something creative can be done with it. And we're bypassing the effects, the toxic effects of the shadow of this, virtual space, because it creates havoc. It's created havoc on my nervous system. And I'm just trying to integrate it. Because as a highly imaginative and extremely sensitive person, I pick up on stuff from people at a physical distance. And, you know, doing these kinds of events can take its toll if they're incoherent. If they are coherent occasions, I'm revitalized. And I feel a tremendous pleasure and commitment. But if they're decoherent, I stay away from it. So this is my invitation. Let's get coherent spaces going for us, and then we can turn this motherfucker around, you know, so we can create a physical and subtle and virtual spaces where we all can flourish, or flourish well enough. So is there anything you would like to add or subtract or go in a different direction, or does that sound like a plan that we could work on in the future?
I really appreciate you putting out that idea. Just that's the simple, I know it will be a complex conversation, but that's the simple idea. Let's have a conversation. And going with it. We want to have a conversation about these different authors that we've learned about over the past few weeks. The Cosmos Cafe is not always the place for it. Not everybody wants to hear about these topics. The cafe is a cafe. Anybody is welcome. So we need a separate chat room. We need a more intimate kind of wing of the cafe.
Right.
Sorry, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Sorry, if I receive a call, then I get cut off. But
yeah,
I would like for that to happen. Perhaps within we can communicate about that happening.
Yeah.
So
yeah, and I'm looking forward to the next cafe where something has been settled on, and we're going to be learning from one of our colleagues here. And so I'll be prepared for that. And maybe whatever openings there are after that, we could shape something that would be
Mm-hmm.
at
And I
the le-
have
with the
ideas about that too, how to go about.
because I think the cafe is a very sophisticated group of people, some very smart people. So but I think sometimes some people don't want to be as active, I think, as you and I want to be. Some people want to sit back and, make comments or orient themselves around what someone else has already framed. I think that's where Ed is coming from, more or less.
Well, we could do something as simple as assigning weeks, and it might break up the flow occasionally, but we've noted, well, we can just break out a different conversation between me and you if we want to talk about what we talked about the week before in the cafe.
That's
and
right.
Just have the cafe as that platform. And so we can say, okay, the first week you're in charge, Johnny, of coming up with the cafe.
Right.
You could get a guest or you could do it yourself. Ed, you're doing the second week. You can have open frame or whatever.
That's
so
right.
Something like that would be great. And then,
And
if next week we have a conversation come out of the subversive pedagogies, then we can open that up to a different time frame that might work out for worldwide friends, whatever it might be. So but then it comes back to who has the time. So we'll see.
And to be as collaborative as we can, because we don't want to be choosing topics that no one has an interest in. Then it just becomes a monologue, and that to me bores me. But I'm also thinking about what is the body. Just out of this conversation that you and I've had today, and the clean interview I tried to do with Marco, I believe this could be an interesting, for those who are into experiential, when your body is at its best, it's like what? This is just coming to me. But I think it could be real interesting to get good quality data from people and then to externalize it, create some sort of map, and then have a conversation around it. And then we could frame it in many other conversations might emerge out of that we could frame in many different ways. But I'm very interested in this virtual, subtle, physical interplay. And I don't think, like Marco said, there's not much consensus on what that is. And I don't think the traditions have supported this at all. I think they've actually kept us in the dark about a lot of things. Like cities, you're not really supposed to be concerned with these things. They're actually frowned upon. But Aurobindo was very interested in them. And I think that we should be paying really attention to the future of the body. And these magical capacities, I think, could serve us now as part of this cultural, what does he call it? The cultural capacities. If we can bring that forward and refine our models, this could be creating the new subjectivities that could start to emerge. Anyway, that's my 2 cents. I've really enjoyed this conversation. I hope.
I did too. I have a quick question. How did you discover Loeffler? I'm trying. So the reason I'm asking, I'm not trying to crack your brain or anything like that, but I like to know the genealogy of.
I think I got
where your thought originated.
I think I got him on YouTube. The Center for
popped up one day.
Yeah, and I saw that talk, and I followed other talks that he's given, and I took a lot of notes. And then because he's written very little, but he references a lot of people that I referenced. One was this German archaeologist, and I found some of her stuff online, and I found some other stuff by people that he's in communication with online that I think is great stuff. I think it's called Glass Bead. Have you heard of Glass Bead?
Yeah, I just finished reading The Glass Bead Game, and I was searching around for articles, and it led me to the Glass Bead Journal, I guess, maybe?
Yes.
But I forgot about it. I put it on my to-do tab of many, many different things, but it had a great article. Oh, I guess I posted something that was I don't think anybody really responded to it. It was about the Dyson, Freeman Dyson.
Oh, yes.
And,
You got that from the glass bead?
so that article was from the glass bead.
Very cool. There are a lot of, I'm just trying to explore some of those articles, and some of them really interest me a lot. Inigo Wilkins is one of the guys. He's writing on noise and signal. And you know that whole story about the crow cracking the nut, that's been circulated for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd seen the YouTube video or heard about it before, but it was after I heard him use that in the way that he used it that really got me very curious, because it seemed to, we were looking at the perceptual space of a crow and imagining what must be in that perceptual space.
You've seen the video I posted of the crow sledding, right? That was something I saw a couple of years ago. That was on the the Ultimate Potential cafe I did a long time ago, but that baffled me, how animals can, like, that's not something that you would think a crow would do. Perhaps it saw humans doing it, which would be interesting as well, but there's also the thread that they just developed it themselves for this pleasure seeking of experiencing the thrill of sledding.
Yeah, I think the whole area of human communication and animal communication and the shared attention that animals and humans, and what's holding together those communications, you know, how are the embodiment and the embedment, and how are we transmitting? These are deep, I think, issues that are themes that I think are very compelling. But I think, what was I going to say? Oh, I have tons of books that I'm reading, but I think that's the trans individual, that's Simon Don. I don't think there's enough on Simon Don he hasn't been translated enough to know about him, but I think we know enough from having read Aaron Manning to appreciate that the trans individual that he's trying to track, we're doing that. We're doing the trans individual. Because we're going to these, if we can go to these other levels and stabilize at the identity level long enough with another person, using your metaphors, my metaphors, our metaphors.
Just today, there was I was watching Sheldrake's his band TED Talk or something, but he mentioned crystal. He was describing his morphic resonance and mentioned how the crystal, as it develops, it builds off of the previous crystal, and it's not necessarily in genetic evolution. It's building off of this trans individuation. That's right. And that's the same metaphor Simon Dunn uses, and so there's a lot that can be explored in that realm there, and things that Sheldrake has talked about and others that seem invisible are becoming more physical for so many different people, unless it's just the crowd I hang out with now or something. But even with someone like my wife, who she's open to ideas, but to actually read a book about this or that, maybe. But I can have these conversations with her, and she understands as long as I'm able to articulate it enough. And so that it requires a reception to receive these odd ideas that aren't physically tangible, but they are in some sense physical. So
right. I'm very excited.
So I'd like to see where we go with all this.
Yeah, and also I'm trying to think a little bit ahead, but the Loeffler would work really well with the post-money kind of idea. And I know Marco expressed an interest in that. And this whole, the whole idea about the frame crisis that I think is epidemic in our culture. We don't know how to find the frame because there's so much coming at us. And
would that be equivalent to we don't have a universal story?
Yeah, we don't have a myth, but we don't have and I believe our economy and our institutions are suffering because we don't have a frame for what is being made available in the data, and how much of it is driven by algorithms, by people who want to get something from us, or is genuine science, or, you know. So I think we're in it's a wonderful time to be alive, because we could, I think, do a better job of creating these little niches, you know, where we could bring our attention to bear on certain themes or motifs, and we can make it an assignment. Okay, I'm going to research this, and that's your assignment to research that. We can bring our creative research projects together and see what happens next. So
I think Loeffler and Paul Mason, it seemed like a lot of people had read Paul Mason, the post-capitalism book, but he kind of goes in the same direction as Loeffler. So
I don't know him. But I think it'd be a great thing. It would be labor intense. It wouldn't be so labor intensive. One person be taking on the responsibility of presenting something. I mean, I feel comfortable with that, and you may feel comfortable with that, but other people might not.
Right.
But I don't want any one person to have to be doing all that labor intensive kind of, because it creates an instability, I think, because you can burn out really fast if you're the one having to come up with all the ideas. I don't think Marco wants to do that, and I don't want to do it either.
I don't either. I'm definitely not good at it.
Yeah, I'm a collaborative kind of guy. So, but if we had a theme that we were all attracted to, and you want to research somebody, I can research someone, we can bring them together in a forum and say, hey, this is something I found out, this is something you found out. Do they have anything in common with one another? I think that that could be a lively conversation that could be had, because we're not pitching it to people who are already experts, but it's peer-to-peer, and we're all learning, and there's no teacher here giving wisdom, and there's no pop quiz at the end of it. You know, I think that's where the benefits of this kind of, what do you call it, the post-formal education. We may be pioneers in this area, you know, where ordinary citizens can come together and we can evaluate the experts, those who are claiming to be experts, because we have now resources that no one has ever had to validate or invalidate claims that people are making. And a lot of these experts are claiming is bullshit. You know? We just need to detect that fast enough so that we don't end up spending way too much time taking seriously something that shouldn't be taken seriously at all.
We noted that even with Gidley, who we side with, we're on her side as the project. We know well. She's also developing those maps that kind of get muddied, and
she's a big chunker. She chunks really large, you know, a huge territory. But I think it's our job to find out, these big thinkers, how are we going to apply this? And they need help, because they're not always the best person to figure out applications. Wilbur is not very good at it. And he admitted it, basically. He said, somebody please find some applications for this. Because it won't go anywhere if people aren't able to use these ideas and embody them and ground them and apply them in certain contexts. So I think we're doing a good job. I think we're doing the best that we can. And our best is pretty good. I'm very proud of both of us. So let's do more of it. Let's do more of it and do it better.
It's been a pleasure, John. I'm glad we got a chance to speak in this context. So.
Me too. I'm looking forward to the next time.
Thank you, John.
See you next time.
Bye.
Have a great day.
You too.